again and welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is for a road trip type scarf or shawl. It's got 3 tassels and it's been done in double knit yarn using a 5.5mm hook. The yarn I'm using is a Mandala Lion brand in the cakes. I'm not entirely sure what the colour is. It might be Valkyrie, but I'm not 100% sure. We're going to start with a chain of 5 and then we're going to join that chain into a ring that we're going to work into. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Join with a slip stitch to form a circle and pull tight. We're now going to work into this circle here. Just move the other work out of the way there. The first stitch on every row is going to be 3 chain, and that's going to count as the first double. So we're going to work 3 chain and then we're going to work 4 more doubles into that ring. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So in effect we've now got 5 stitches. We've got the chain that we started with plus the 4 doubles that we've worked there into that ring. We're going to do 2 chain and then we're going to work 5 doubles again into that same loop. Got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So this has formed the V shape of the shawl because it's going to work out as a triangle. On each row as we start and finish, we're going to start with 3 stitches, so we're going to work an increase of 2 into that first stitch to give 3. We're going to do exactly the same at the other end. I'll just zoom out slightly. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. So the first stitch again is going to be 3 chain. 1, 2, 3. We're going to turn so that we're working on the opposite side, and we're going to work 2 doubles into that same stitch as we did the 3 chains. So there's 1 and 2. We're now just going to work 1 double in each double down to the 2 chain space. So on this particular row we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. So altogether we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches. Into the 2 chain space we're going to work 2 doubles, 2 chain and 2 doubles. We're then going to work 1 double in each of these stitches up to the last stitch, which was the 3 chain, and in the top of the 3 chain we're going to work the 3 doubles. So the first one into that first stitch, so we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then we do 3 stitches into the top of this 3 chain starting stitch, so it's into this chain here, and work 3 doubles. There's 1 and 2 and 3. So we've now got a definite triangle shape there. And just see if I can adjust the lighting slightly. That's a little bit better. So the next rows now, we're going to do exactly the same as we did on this row here, the second row, where we're going to work 3 stitches into the first stitch, 1 double into each of the stitches down to this 2 chain space, and then 1 double in each stitch to the last stitch. We're going to work 3 doubles. So just work those for you now. So we start again with 3 chain and the 2 doubles into that first stitch, and then 1 double into each stitch all the way down to the 2 chain space. I think for this particular scarf, of the colour changing yarn seems to work quite well, but you could, if you wanted to, work in blocks and change the colour as you go along to the different parts of the pattern. So again, we're back to the 2 chain space. We're going to work 2 doubles, 2 chain and 2 doubles. Then again, we were going to work all the way back along these stitches up to the 3 chain that we started with, and we're going to work the 3 stitches into that one. So 1 double in each stitch all the way up. So these rows are quite straightforward, just working double crochets. There's the last double into the stitch. We're now going to do 3 doubles into this 3 chain first stitch, and it's into the 3rd chain. So 1 and 2 and 3. We've now got 3 rows of doubles. We're going to carry on until we've worked 6 rows of doubles. Each one is exactly the same. We're going to work 3 stitches into the first and last stitch, 1 stitch all the way down to the 2 chain space at the bottom, and then 1 stitch into each and every stitch all the way back up. And I'll meet you when we get to the end of row 6. We've now got our 6 rows of double crochets with the increases at the 2 ends and in the centre there. I'll just show you the next band that we're going to work now, and that's the puff stitch and cross stitch border, band that is going to follow on. So we've got the double knit, the double crochet band, which was 6 rows, and now we're going to work this band here. This is where the colour change comes in quite nice on these scarves. So the first row of this next band, we're going to again carry on with the 3 increases in the 2 end stitches. So we'll work 3 chain, turn, we're going to do 2 more doubles into that same stitch, and then we're going to work all of the doubles along the row to the chain space, but with this time we're going to work a back post double. So if you're not familiar with a back post double, we yarn over, we go behind the stitch, put the hook in front of the stitch and pick up the loop, pull that stitch through. We're going to yarn over once and yarn over twice, and it brings the stitch to the front that causes a ridge. So yarn over into the space between the stitches, in front of the stitch to pick up the loop, pull through, yarn over through two and yarn over through two. So we're going to do that all the way along down to the 2 chain space, just working a back post double. And don't forget, you can pause the video until you get down to that centre point to give you a chance to catch up. I know not everybody crochets at the same speed. So back post double in each stitch all the way down to the 2 chain space. So I'll let you work your back post doubles down to that 2 chain space and I'll meet you there. So when you've worked the last back post double into the last stitch here, we're now at the 2 chain space at the V, at the point of the triangle. We're going to do 1 double into that 2 chain space, 2 chain and 1 double, and then the other side is exactly the same. We're going to work a back post double in each stitch right up to the last stitch, and in that one we're going to work the 3 doubles as we've done on previous rows. So back post double each of the doubles all the way up to the last stitch. And again, if you want to pause the video to catch up, I'll meet you when we get to that last stitch. Now worked a back post double into each stitch all the way to this last stitch, which was the 3 chain, and again I'm going to work 3 doubles into that last stitch. I've got 1, 2 and 3. There are only the 2 bands to this design, the band where we've got the 6 rows of doubles and then the next band, and then we carry on with the 6 rows of doubles, and you can work the scarf to whatever size you want. You can stop it at any point or you can make it a little bit longer, it's entirely up to you. So we turn over, again on each and every stitch we're going to work 3 stitches into that first stitch. We're now going to chain 1, we're going to skip this first stitch here, we're going to work a puff stitch into the next stitch. So the puff stitch is yarn over into the stitch, pick up a loop once, into the stitch, pick up a loop twice, into the loop, pick up, into the stitch, pick up a loop 3 times, yarn over. We're going to pull through all the stitches apart from that last one, yarn over and through the 2, and there we've got a puff stitch. Chain 1, we're going to skip a stitch and we're going to work a puff stitch into the next one. So that's yarn over 1 and 2 and 3. Just to be sure that you've got the right amount of loops, we've now got 2, 4, 6, 7 loops on the hook. We're going to come through 6, yarn over and come through 2 and then chain 1. We're going to carry on all the way along this row in exactly the same way. We're going to work a puff stitch followed by a chain, skip a stitch, puff stitch followed by a chain, skip a stitch and a puff stitch into the next one, and so on until we reach the middle 2 chain space. You could, if you want to, make the bobbles a little bit bigger by going around the hook 4 times, but because this is a scarf that's going to be worn with the V at the front, with the point at the front, I think it's just a little bit better to keep it light. So I'm only working the 3 yarn overs for the puff stitches. And 3 through 6, yarn over through 2 and chain 1. And when we get to this middle 2 chains here, we're going to chain 1. This time we're going to do 2 puff stitches into this 2 chain space with 2 chains in between. So yarn over 1, 2 and 3. This time we're going to chain 2 and we're going to do another puff stitch into that same 2 chain space. Chain 1, and then we're going to skip the first stitch here. We're going to now work a puff stitch in alternate stitches all the way back down the other side. So skip this one, work a puff stitch, chain 1, skip 1, work a puff stitch. We're just going to do the same all the way down the other side. So I'll meet when we get down to the bottom of this side. Worked the puff stitches all the way along to the end. We've done the puff stitch, chain 1, and then we're going to skip the second to last stitch and we're going to work 3 doubles into the top of that 3 chain that we started the previous row with. We turn over. Again we're going to work 3 chain and 2 doubles into that first stitch. Now over these next 2 stitches we're going to work a cross stitch. So we skip the 2 stitches and work a double into the 1 chain space, and then we work a double back in front of the first of the 2 doubles, so the stitch crosses over like so. We're now going to work all the way along, working a double crochet cross over each of the puff stitches. So we skip the chain space, we skip the puff stitch, we go into that next chain space and work a double. We then go back into the chain space before the puff stitch and work the second half of the cross by working another double. We work exactly the same all the way along, working into the chain space after the puff and then back and work a double in the chain space before the puff stitch. So the work will look like this, where you can see the definite crosses there that go over each of the puff stitches. So carry on all the way along this side, working the cross stitch doubles over the puff stitches, and I'll meet you when you get to the end. Now reached the last puff stitch before the 2 chain space. We're going to do exactly the same over this one. Into the 2 chain space, work a double into the chain space before the puff stitch with a double, and we're then going to work a double, 2 chain and a double all into that same 2 chain space. We're going to then work a cross stitch double over this first puff stitch, so into the 2 chain space after the puff stitch, then into the 2 chain space that we had from the previous row, and then just carry on working one cross stitch over each of the puff stitches and work that all the way to the end. If you wanted to work the scarf as well in a thicker yarn, it does work up quite well in an Aran weight, which is a worsted weight I believe, but you would need to use a 6.5mm hook to get the right tension. It makes a much thicker finish to the scarf. I'll just carry on working the cross stitch doubles over all the puff stitches down to the last stitch. As we get to the other end, again we've got the 2 stitches that formed the 3 doubles at the beginning of the row, so we'll do a cross over the last puff stitch, and then the final cross stitch is going to go over these 2 doubles from the previous row. So we'll go into the chain space for the first double, back to the chain space for the second one. We've now just got this 3 chain stitch that we started the previous row with, and again we're going to work into that stitch 3 doubles. 1, 2 and 3. So we've now got the row of back post doubles, we've got a row of puff stitches with a chain stitch in between. We've now worked the crosses over the puff stitches. I'm going to flip over again and work the 3 stitches into that first stitch. And chain 1. We're now going to work a puff stitch in between these 2 stitches here where we've increased on the previous row. So we go into the space between the 2 stitches, pull up a loop once, twice, 3 times, yarn over through 6, yarn over through 2 and chain 1. We're now going to work in between the crossed doubles from the previous row here, and we're going to work 1 puff stitch inside the cross that we worked on the previous row. So in between the 2 stitches where you can see the cross, and work a puff stitch, and then chain 1, and we go straight into the next in between the 2 doubles that we worked to form the cross, and work a puff. We just do exactly the same all the way down to the centre 2 chain space. So carry on working the puff stitch followed by chain 1 into the next stitch to work the next puff, and just work the same all the way along to that 2 chain space. So I'll let you carry on. If you want to pause the video, please do, and I'll meet you when we get to the centre. We've worked the puff stitches all the way down in between each of the cross stitches down to where we've got 1 stitch and the 2 chain space. We're going to do 1 chain, and again we're going to work 1 double, 2 chain, 1 double into that 2 chain space. We're going to skip this double here, chain 1, and we're going to work a puff stitch into the first cross stitch of the other side. Chain 1 and then a puff stitch in between the cross on the next, and we carry on the same all the way down the other side. Coming towards the last cross stitch there where we're going to work the puff stitch, chain 1, and then the final puff stitch is going into the first 2 stitches of this set of 3 stitches, so we're going to do the puff stitch in between stitch 1 and stitch 2. 1, 2 and 3. I'm going to chain 1, and then again we're going to work the 3 doubles into that last stitch. 1, 2 and 3. This next row is the only row where we use a single crochet, and it's a little bit different along the row. So to start off with, we're going to work 2 chain, and that's going to count as the first single. We're going to do just 1 more single into that first stitch. We're then going to work a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. There's 1 and 2. We're going to do a single into the chain space, and then we're going to work a front post single around the puff stitch. So we go behind the stitch with the hook, pick up a loop, pull it to the front, yarn over and pull through 2, and then we're going to do 1 single into the chain space and a front post single around the puff stitch. We're going to do exactly the same all the way along. Single into the chain space, front post single around the puff stitch. We just work all the way along each of the puff stitches. You'll be able to see as well that the edges are straightening out as well to make the large triangle. And just carry on all the way along, working exactly the same. We've come to the last puff stitch here. We're going to work the front post single. We're going to work a single into the chain space. We're going to work a single into that last stitch, and then we're going to work 1 single, 2 chain and 1 single into the 2 chain space. Coming down the other side, we're going to do a single into that first double, a single into the chain space, and then a front post single around the puff stitch, and carry on all the way down the other side exactly the same. A single in the chain space and a front post single around the puff stitch, and I'll see you when we get down to that last puff stitch there. I've worked the front post single around that last puff stitch. We're going to work a single into the chain space and then a single into each of the next 2 stitches, and in the very last stitch, which is the 3 chain, I'm going to work 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. Now going to turn over our work, and because we had, I'll just show you on another one that I've already done, because we had the band here where we did the back post doubles to form a ridge, we're now going to do front post doubles that will be on the reverse side to create a ridge on this part. So we're going to start as we did with all the other rows with the 3 stitches into that first stitch. So we've got 3 chain and then followed by the 2 doubles. We're now going to work around each of the singles that we've done from the previous row, but we're working a front post double. So behind the stitch, pick up the loop, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2, yarn over, behind the stitch, pick up the loop, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2, and just carry on working a front post double all down the side until we get to the 2 chain space. And you can see on the other side that we're forming a ridge here. So I'll meet you when we get down to the centre 2 chain, just working a front post double around every single from the previous row. And when we get down to the 2 chain space here, we're going to just work 1 double, 2 chain and 1 double into that 2 chain space, and then we go back to the front post doubles around every stitch all the way along to the end. And I'll see you when we get to the end of this row. Just coming down to the last few stitches, working the front post right to the very last one. And then into that first 2 chain at the start, we're going to work the 3 doubles. We've got 1, 2 and 3. Just pull that out slightly. So that is the whole of the pattern repeat from row 2. Row 1 was the first rows into the ring that we made. So the next 6 rows are just a repeat of row 2, which is working a double in each stitch down to the centre here, where you're going to work 2 doubles, 2 chains and 2 doubles. So you would work now 6, I'll just show you on this other one that I've already done the 6, sorry, I've done the 5 rows. You've got the row that were the front post, and then you will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would do a 6th row, and then you start back again with the 7th row here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Row 7 is the row of back post doubles here, and then we've got the row of puff stitches, the row of cross stitches, the row of puff stitches. We've then got the row of the singles with the front post singles, and then we do the front post double into each of those stitches. So that's the full pattern repeat, and you can do that as many repeats as you want until you get your scarf to the length that you require it to be. That I did, that was shown at the beginning of the tutorial, has got the row, the band of doubles, and then the band of crosses, a band of the doubles, a band of the crosses, and then I did one final row with the just the doubles, and then I did one final row just to finish it off and give it another ridge. I did one row of back post doubles just to finish it off, and I also made the 3 tassels just to go on the 3 corners, the piece that sits in the middle and then the 2 pieces that wrap around the neck that hang down. I've done a tassel on each of those too. I do hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope to see you again soon. Please subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.